After a lifetime of searching, I have discovered the fabled city of Katowice, once the jewel of an esports empire. 50,000 were said to have gathered here for free bread and circuses, like the Roman Colosseum. What treasures lie here, waiting to be unearthed? My God! It's the fabled mouse of the mighty Flusher. We can finally answer one of CSGO's most elusive mysteries. Let's just take a look. Oh no! The side button's been removed. We'll never have the answers now.
What oddities will Thorin uncover on his next adventure in the catacombs of CSGO? That and more on the next episode of the Esports Archaeologist.
Welcome to Get to the Point, our Flashpoint pre-show. Here we are at Twickenham Stadium in our third day of playoffs. Now, we've seen the upper bracket semifinals already, which means today is our match of losers. Two extra losers, double losers, if you will be going home today in our matches, and we will winnow the field down to 6 teams after today. So we'll discuss that in just a minute. Joining me to watch some losers are Thorin and Alan.
I won't lie, Monty, I'm a bit nervous after the last segment we did together and what you asked me, so refrain this time. Let's not go for that angle.
That is, you don't have to worry about that here. We're professional here on the desk. I save all my bullshit for the blind spot. Most of my bullshit.
I look forward to it,
Most
Monty.
of my
I look
bullshit.
forward to it.
Exactly. And plus, if you want to fuck with your mum's head, just tell her you're actually on a broadcast now, mate.
She saw that clip, you know.
Did she agree? Oh, now we have to ask. Did she agree with your answer?
Be a bit awkward if she didn't, so I don't know why you're asking that question.
I don't think she really commented on what I actually said, fortunately, but she acknowledged that the segment did actually happen, so that was bad enough,
great.
I think.
That's great. I'm glad that I gave you both those mental images. That touches a special place in my heart. But
not mine.
Let's get on to the tournament and take a look at our format so far. If you're just joining us for the first time, we did complete our group stages a couple of weeks back. Now we are in our double elimination 8-team playoff bracket. All matches are best of 3. Winner takes home half, $500,000, that is, of that $1 million prize pool. And every team that is in the bracket will be getting a chunk of the overall prize pool. So, with that in mind, we have already played our first 2 semifinals, and that leaves us with these 4 teams who have so far lost. Now, those teams, you'll see them in the lower bracket in a moment, but in the upper bracket first, we have seen Virtus Pro and Big advance, and Fnatic and MIBR as well. MIBR with the big upset over OG last night, which leaves OG struggling in the losers bracket later on today versus Dignitas Vi. And our first match is going to be Mad Lions versus Envy. Envy surprisingly tenacious despite having only won their last chance qualifier series so far in Flashpoint. They haven't given up these matches easily and have even taken Big to the brink. So with that in mind, we are going to give you guys your initial takeaways after our first round of competition here. We have now seen all the playoff teams one time.
I think the most surprising thing of all was there really were no favourites in the end. Like,
Yeah.
on paper, every single matchup, I would say with the exception of maybe Mad Lions Virtus Pro, had a clear on-paper winner.
Yes.
That all the factors, the map pool, the record, current world rankings, all suggested. But actually, in the end, every single underdog could have won their matches, including the aforementioned Envy, who
Yes.
only won their last chance qualifier match. They've lost every other series in the tournament. And obviously, Dignitas themselves, another last chance qualifier team, almost took out Fnatic. That very nearly happened. Again, then obviously we did have the upset of MIBR taking out OG, and then Mad Lions, you can just go and ask Refresh. That was a winnable match. They just didn't happen to get it.
It was a one match.
Yeah, it
it was a
definitely
one
was.
match, except for that mistake. But, one player pushing too far forward can throw the entire match if the other team can put it together and come back, right, Alan?
Certainly in CS. I think in the group stages, we have quite a lot of 2-0s. There were matches that weren't so close. So far in the playoffs, every single game has been close. As Duncan said, there were chances for either team to win every series. Hopefully that continues in the playoffs. I'm not so sure it's going to happen today, but hopefully at least when we get deep in the playoffs, we have super good series, super close, maybe some overtimes and some really great games.
I even think it's actually a massive positive, not for them, obviously, that OG is already in the lower bracket round one, because also, if you look at the bracket there, in case people don't know, on the next playoff round, we flip the bracket. So that means essentially that I think they play the loser out of Virtus Pro versus Big. So even if it's Virtus Pro, like, if OG want to win this tournament, they are going to have to run a murderer's row. They're going to have to maybe beat like VP, then you could obviously have loads of potentially good teams, Fnatic, Big, and this is all just to even get near the finals. Whereas you would think you have to beat those teams to win the tournament.
Yeah, to be fair, OG, after they did lose to Genji, turned it around very quickly and did actually complete in their group the losers bracket run to take first place. So we know they have it in them. They are going to have to play a few more matches, though, which is always brutal in these kind of schedules, and especially as we approach the grand finals and the losers bracket finals on Sunday. So with that in mind, let's talk about some of the teams that were the big underdogs, and you guys can throw on your scrubs, snap on some rubber gloves, and do a little bit of surgery here. So if you had to open up, we'll start with two teams that I think most people would put as the underdogs for today, even though they have been performing much better than we expected recently. So with that said, let's start with our first team that we'll see today, which is Envy. Envy is a team we didn't expect much out of coming into this, despite their boot camping, and yet certain players like Calix have had some really good performances so far. So if you had to take apart Envy and rebuild it better than they were before, which pieces would you remove right now, and who would you add in their place if you had total control and unlimited money over this roster?
Right, we already tried this one time, Alan. Remember, it was
We'll
with
do better
Envy,
this time.
and
We'll
then
do
you had
better this
unlimited
time.
money, and your
I'm gonna
first
get rid
choice
of one.
was to keep Nifty. So I'm just going to say that doesn't. Remember the
was
part about the
Leggy and not
unlimited money.
Nifty.
Okay, Leggy. Okay, so what would you do now, though?
So I think the way to look at Envy is who would you keep on this lineup. I think Calix, so far in the tournament, we'll talk about him later, I'm sure. He's been looking really great, at least individually. Maybe he's not, incredibly well-versed in the team game yet, or the team's playing well around him. But on his own individual skills level and how he can perform really great, I think Legia actually, his calling has looked quite a lot better throughout the tournament. So if you can get a really great option, go for it, replace Legia. But if Legia is the only choice, I don't think it's so bad. I think it's the other players we need to be looking at here. I think Mihu actually is probably the number one player. I think it just doesn't really make sense on this lineup at the moment. We might even talk about it a bit later. It just feels like his CT spots don't make sense. A really good example is Ramp on Nuke. Can you imagine a player like Mihu, who on his old teams likes to be aggressive, he likes to push forward, playing a spot like Ramp where it's so static, you just fall back and play the angles. It just doesn't suit him as a player. And with this Envy team, when Thomas was coming into this lineup, I was fairly sure Thomas was going to be a role player. I thought he'd be a CT anchor and default to the edges on T side. He doesn't do that. He's a rotator, and it's Mihu that's picked up being the anchor spot. So just role-wise, I'm not sure Mihu makes sense on this team. So I'd probably be looking for a player that's really suited to those anchor spots. Not sure if anybody really springs to mind, but there are so many players like, not Brolan, but that sort of player that could play a static anchor spot on CT, and then you just throw him in the pack on T side. He goes in with the nades. That sort of player I'd have. So I'd definitely be swapping out Mihu, and then probably Nifty as well. If Nifty's not calling, we need to see more from him. I don't think we've seen that much from him so far. Maybe a bit better throughout some of the series.
He has been better.
He has been getting better, but in this day and age, in 2020 Counter-Strike, the CT AWPer should be dominating the game. They should have all the options. They should be able to call around themselves. It just feels like Nifty maybe doesn't have the confidence. Maybe the team's not set up around him. Whatever's going on, I think they just need to switch. Maybe it's just, the dynamics of those kind of personalities together doesn't work. So I'd go for a more proactive AWPer if it was my call.
Yeah, I will say, Legia's individual performance, I think, has also exceeded expectations. Would you agree?
He's still
Nora?
garbage. So let's just put that right out on Front Street.
That's fair.
My
That's
point
fair.
is, I agree with Alan. Actually, I think he's done a pretty decent job, though. Like on Dust 2 particularly, I thought their T-side calling was pretty legit, actually. They somewhat exploited big there. It's not like the big guys are scrubs. So I think the key issue for me is, it's like he said about Nifty. If Legee is going to be the in-game leader, and by the way, he is not a complete idiot as an in-game leader. Like, he was part of actually what basically leveled God B up in CSGO because he was a 1.6 great, and then he got to share from God B's brilliance himself as a player under God B. So he's someone who's certainly been around greatness. I could see him being able to lead a team like this. But the point is, as Alan says, if Nifty isn't the IGL, well, now there's no excuse whatsoever of individual level of play. And you're the AWP. It's the most expensive gun we're going to be buying. So I need a straight fire play. I've got an international team here. So at this point in time, that's where I would be spending those millions that they've been promising. So I would be trying to get, listen, obviously I'm going to think of players that are potentially available. I would want some really good NA AWP or something, or we're going to go and scout the next Cirque, the next Poison, one of these types of a player. We're going to hope that we're going to bring them in. Elsewhere in the team, I would keep Calyx, certainly. Just looks like a fabulous player at this point in time. They finally figured out how to use him. I think Legee has undergone the same treatment he had to do with Xantares in Big. Mihu, it depends on how you use him. I think on the T side, he can absolutely stay in the team. I'm not sure about Thomas. He's so fresh to the game. So I would potentially just add one more rifler. I think the type of player I'd want, he's obviously not available, but I'd want someone like a Valde, a guy who's just going to have good skill, but he's not going to have to take up all the resources. He's just going to help anchor my team, as it were. I think you're not that many pieces away from actually being a solid team now, because they have done something of a turnaround.
Yeah, and they have played, as you were saying, Big very closely. We'll get more into their previous game and dissect that in a bit. Let's change the topic of conversation, though, to another team that could use a little surgery, and that is going to be Dignitas Vi. Again, a team like Envy that I think potentially overperformed based on what we thought. They have not gotten banged out. In fact, they finished third in their group instead of fourth. They won their last chance qualifier match. So there have been some highs here. I know you're going to say C.R.A.E, get rid of him immediately. Correct, Thorin?
I'd just get rid of both of them. Like, the Heath guy, he's had some moments. Like, he had some clutches he won. He's had some maps that were good. But the point is, you have to ask, what roles are they playing in these teams? Like, at least the C.R.A.E guy is the entry guy. In theory, he's supposed to die. It's just he doesn't get the kills as well. That's my main problem there. And I have no reason. It's not like these were hyped players. No one was excited about these guys. They weren't even on anyone's radar. So I'd just say, I'm pretty sure they just did it as a cynical move. They didn't have any money. They just brought in people who could play. I mean, literally, the C.R.A.E guy, I think it was C.R.A.E was the one that they said just found him in like a face
Heath.
or something.
Yeah.
Heath, there you go. So it's not like they were out there on the transfer market. So for me, what I would do is, again, you need to bring in some talent. So at this point in time, I know NIP, the organisation, doesn't have loads of money. I mean, look at how they've just been fucking all their players for the last few years. Like, I'd go out there and I'd spend big and I'd try to buy one of their players. Like, why not bring Nork over to this team? Why not go and get Plopsky? Like, these are players that we've seen have got quality. And the best thing is, they've been sort of brought to the brink by threat in the NIP org. You could take them, put them with your veterans and potentially push them over the top.
Yeah, the problem I have with this Dig lineup is I said this to Maui. If you told me tomorrow that we're going to get rid of C.R.A.E and Heath, we're going to bring in Exist and Get Right, it wouldn't even be that bad of a roster move. And that's just like, that's kind of the problem you have with this team, is they changed the lineup and it's not even any better. It doesn't even really make sense role-wise, in my opinion. And yeah, as Duncan was saying, if you're looking at different players, the thing about the Swedish and even the Norwegian scene, if they're going to go that route, there's so many players in MDL and all the lower, literally hundreds with better team experience than players like Heath, better team experience than players like C.R.A.E. So there's so many options. You just get the new kind of young players that are exciting. You probably get rid of Hulzerk, I think, as well, and get a more exciting AWPer that's more proactive. So yeah, it just feels like the whole team kind of needs an overhaul. It doesn't really make sense to me.
So do you keep Forrest and Freiburg?
I mean, at this point in time, you've just got nothing as a team if you get rid of them. At that point in time, you're just like the sixth best Scandinavian team. Not even that, actually, because of all the Danish teams. So you'd just be garbage, wouldn't you? At this point in time, for branding, you've got to probably keep one of them at least. Because otherwise, why would we bother doing segments about them? Why would anyone bother following them as a team? So I think you probably keep one of the two, potentially both, and keep building around them. Like, obviously, Freiburg's just the IGL now. You hope Forrest picks his level of play up. The main thing for me as well is, I don't hate keeping Hulzerk. It's just that he looks like he's a year away from actually delivering on his potential. He hasn't had enough tournament play this year, and he was inexperienced anyway. So it's like I've kept saying, people have jumped the gun on him on that one. Everyone goes, oh, look, he had a great game that map. It's like, he doesn't even do it for the whole series. So I've got to see him get a little bit more blooded. But I could believe next year he could be the player you would have wanted to recruit this year.
That's fair. How has Freiburg's IGLing been for you, Alan?
I don't think it's been horrific. It's the thing about Freiburg is actually his exposure to teams when he left NIP was actually really good for him in terms of an in-game leader sense. Him getting exposure to Danish teams like Heroic, that sort of environment is incredible for like learning how to call, seeing loads of different perspectives. So I have some belief that he could set up a pretty good system. I remember from watching Dignitas with Exist calling, the only way I can really describe it to people at home that don't really know is like, it didn't even look like they were playing CS in 2020. It looked like they were trying to play an old style of CS that's super outdated, super slow, super static, super passive on CT. At least with Freiburg, it feels more like they're playing sort of 2020 CS, even if maybe it's still fairly standard. They're still trying to play proper CS and have trading and team play. So in that sense, it's okay. I mean, the question with this team like Dignitas is, what are you actually aiming for with this team? And I'm not really sure what that is anymore, to be honest.
So, yeah, that's to me, like, if you're going to play that style of IGLing, then you have to have the firepower in order to compensate for a lack of complex strats, right? So you can't do neither.
Yeah, it's true. The thing is that for some teams, I understand it when they play really standard, because at the moment they're trying to get the standard game down, the standard setups, the standard defaults, and then later you add the more complicated stuff. So there is some logic to it. It just means that in these early tournaments, you're going to have a lot of problems. And if you compare it to a team like MIBR, they've gone totally the other way. They don't default really at all. They play the 4-1s, the contact plays, they do the crazy stuff. And very proactive on CT. So they're playing to win now. That's probably the approach I would have taken if I was like coaching Dignitas, for example. So I don't think it won't necessarily be terrible in the long run, but it might be the case for this lineup that the lineup might even be dead before they get to that point of adding the more complex
It
stuff.
almost certainly will be. There's surely no way this 5-man lineup's going to be around in like 3 months. So that's the problem, is you're pitching towards a perfection that you'll never reach the event horizon of, essentially.
Well, thank you very much, doctors, for your surgery on Envy and Dignitas. We have to talk about our Pinnacle raffle for the playoffs right now. And that, of course, means it's our third week. So it's our third knife. These knives.
That's a potato peeler. Look, it's got a potato peeler on the back. I've seen one of those my whole life. Make the spuds.
It's efficient. It's efficient in the kitchen. So these were all chosen by Mr. James Bardolph, CSGO skin connoisseur. If you are 18 years of older, legal betting age, you can head on over to pinnacle.com/raffle. And if you deposit €10 in your Pinnacle account, you will be eligible for these beautiful knives, and you can tweet them at Mr. James Bardolph. So thank you very much, guys. We're going to be back with some pre-show analysis of Envy coming up next, and we'll see you then.